No one wants me, I need a husband. An Apache woman begs a cowboy for one last chance.
She was known by many names, but none of them truly belonged to her anymore.
To some, she was just an Apache woman from a fading camp near the dry edge of the plains. To others, she was a reminder of a past they wanted to forget. Few people ever asked her what she wanted to be called. Fewer still cared about her story. She had learned to live with that silence, even though it weighed heavily on her heart. She had grown up under wide skies where the land spoke louder than words. As a child, she ran barefoot over warm soil, learning the songs of the wind and the lessons of survival from her elders. Life was never easy, but it had meaning. People looked after one another. Every person had a place, a role, and a reason to wake up each morning. Back then, she'd believed that sense of belonging would last forever. But time changed everything. The land began to fill with strangers, fences and rules she did not understand. Traditions that once guided her people slowly lost their power. Some left to adapt to the new ways. Others stayed behind, holding tightly to what little remained. She tried to do both, and in doing so, she belonged fully to neither world. Each year, the circle around her grew smaller. When she was younger, she dreamed of marriage, not as an escape, but as a partnership. She believed in shared work, shared silence, and shared strength. Yet fate never brought the right moment. Some men left in search of opportunity. Others fell into habits that made life harder instead of better. A few promised things they could not keep. With each passing year, hope thinned like worn cloth. As she aged, whispers followed her wherever she went. Some said she was unlucky. Others said she waited too long. A few claimed she asked for too much, even though all she wanted was a steady life and a kind heart beside her. She stopped responding to the talk, but she could not stop hearing it. Words, even when spoken quietly, have a way of staying. Breakshill. She lived in a small, simple shelter at the edge of a settlement that barely noticed her. Each morning she woke before the sun, not because she had to, but because sleep no longer stayed with her. She prepared her food carefully, stretched her tired hands, and looked out across the land as if expecting an answer from it. Most days the land remained silent. Work was hard to find for someone like her. When she did find it, it was temporary and poorly paid. She cleaned, cooked, mended, and carried without complaint. She knew that showing strength was the only way to survive. Still, strength did not protect her from loneliness. At night, when the world slowed down, the quiet became unbearable. She watched families gather near warm fires. She saw couples share simple laughter after long days of labor. But it made her bitter, but it made her ache. She wondered what it felt like to have someone ask how your day went, and truly want to hear the answer. She wondered what it felt like to be chosen. The elders who once guided her were gone. The younger ones were busy building new lives shaped by different values. She stood in between generations, unseen by both. Even her own reflection felt unfamiliar now. The strong young woman she once was had faded into someone careful, cautious, and tired. Still, she refused to give up completely. Each day she told herself that life could change. Each morning she fixed her hair neatly, straightened her clothes, and walked with dignity. Pride was one thing no one could take from her. Even when she felt unwanted, she carried herself as if she mattered because deep down she believed she did. The plains were unforgiving, but they were honest. They did not pretend to offer comfort. People, on the other hand, often did. She had learned a difference the hard way. Promises came easily.
Commitment did not. Over time, she learned to trust actions more than words.
It was during one of these ordinary days, when hope felt thin and the future uncertain, that she noticed him for the first time. He was not loud or flashy, but he did not demand attention. He moved with purpose, like someone used to relying on himself.
A cowboy weathered by the sun and shaped by long days on horseback passed through the area as part of routine work. To him, the land was a job.
To her, it was memory. She noticed the way he spoke only when necessary. The way his eyes scanned the horizon as if he expected trouble, even in calm moments. He carried himself like someone who had learned not to lean on others. People like that often stayed alone, not because they wanted to, but because it felt safer. She did not approach him. She had learned better than that. Instead, she observed quietly, the way she always had. Their worlds brushed past each other without touching. He barely noticed her, and she pretended not to notice him either. Yet something shifted inside her. Maybe it was the way he treated the land with respect. Maybe it was the tired kindness she thought she saw when he helped someone without being asked. Or maybe it was simply that she had reached a point where silence hurt more than rejection. That night she sat alone under the open sky, listening to the distant sounds of life continuing without her. For the first time in a long while, fear settled deep in her chest. Not fear of hardship, but fear of ending her days completely unseen. She realized then that waiting quietly had brought her nothing but more waiting.
If she wanted change, she would have to risk being turned away.
The thought terrified her. Pride whispered that it was too late, that no one wanted her now. But another voice, softer yet stronger, reminded her that courage often comes at the very end, when there is nothing left to lose. She did not know how she would speak to him. Narration. She did not know what words she would use. All she knew was that she could not remain invisible anymore.
Tomorrow, she decided, she would stop watching life pass her by and step into it, no matter the outcome.
As the stars watched silently, the Apache woman sat with her decision, unaware that this choice, made in quiet desperation, would soon change the course of her life in ways she could never imagine. The cowboy had learned long ago how to live without needing much from anyone. He woke before sunrise, rolled his bed tight, and moved with the steady rhythm of someone who trusted routine more than people. The land was his companion. Horses listened better than humans, and the open plains never asked questions he did not want to answer. He had not always been this way. Once, many years ago, he believed in closeness and shared plans. He believed that hard work and honesty were enough to build a future. But life had taught him otherwise. Loss had come quietly. Then all at once, promises had broken, not with noise, but with absence. Since then he kept his heart guarded, like a gate that rarely opened. When he came to the settlement near the plains, it was for work, nothing more. A few weeks of riding fences, checking livestock, and helping where needed. He did not plan to stay longer than required. Places were temporary. Attachments made leaving harder. People noticed him, of course.
A lone cowboy always stood out. Some greeted him with curiosity, others with caution.
He returned their words politely but briefly. He was not rude, just distant. Distance kept things simple. He saw the Apache woman many times before truly noticing her. At first, she blended into the background of his days, quiet, steady, always busy with something. She moved carefully, as if the world around her could break easily. She did her work without complaint, and spoke only when necessary. Breath. To him, she was just part of the place, like the dry earth and the endless sky. One afternoon, He watched her carry a heavy load across the yard. It was too much for one person, but she did not ask for help. Her steps were slow, but her back stayed straight. Something about that caught his attention, not pity, but respect. Bears. He walked over and took part of the load without saying much. She looked surprised, then nodded once in thanks. Long words passed between them. Still, that brief moment stayed with him longer than he expected. Over the next few days, small moments like that repeated. He noticed how she always finished her tasks, no matter how tired she looked. How she listened more than she spoke. How she carried herself with quiet pride, even when others overlooked her. He told himself it meant nothing. Noticing people did not mean getting close to them. He had made that mistake before. At night, he sat by his fire, cleaning his tools or staring into the flames. He told himself stories about the past he preferred not to remember. He reminded himself why he stayed alone.
Alone meant control. Alone meant fewer wounds.
Grasp. Still, his thoughts began to drift toward her more often than he liked. He wondered what her life had been like. He wondered why someone so steady seemed so alone. Then he stopped himself. Curiosity led to attachment, and attachment led to pain. He had no interest in repeating old lessons. The settlement itself felt uneasy, caught between old ways and new rules. Tension lived in the air, unspoken but heavy. The cowboy had seen places like this before. When worlds collided, people were often left behind. He preferred to pass through such places quickly. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in soft colors, he saw her sitting alone near the edge of the camp. She was not doing anything, just sitting, hands folded, eyes fixed on the horizon. She looked small against the wide land, yet unbroken.
For reasons he could not explain, he stopped his horse nearby.
"Bow, you all right?" he asked, his voice calm, neutral. She looked up, clearly startled. Then she nodded. Yes. That was it. No more words followed. He waited a moment, then tipped his hat and rode on. Yet that simple exchange stayed with him. Ration. He realized how rare it was for him to ask anyone if they were all right. Days passed, and his work continued. He helped fix fences, guided livestock, and kept to himself. But the space between them had shifted. They were no longer strangers who pretended not to see each other. Now there was awareness. Burrow. He noticed how others spoke around her, how their voices softened or dismissed her entirely. He noticed how rarely anyone asked her opinion. It reminded him of himself, always present, rarely invited. Once, during a shared meal, someone made a careless remark that caused quiet laughter from others. The woman lowered her eyes but said nothing. The cowboy felt a sudden tightening in his chest. Dance. He did not laugh. Instead, he changed the subject with a simple comment about the next day's work. The laughter faded. He did not know why he did that. He told himself it was just fairness. Still, he saw the quick glance she gave him, full of surprise and something else he could not name. That night, he slept poorly. Old memories surfaced, ones he usually kept buried. Times when he had stayed silent instead of standing up. Times when silence had cost him more than words ever could. He began to realize that keeping distance had not made him strong. It had only made him alone. Yet he resisted the thought. He reminded himself, that he would be leaving soon. Starting something he could not finish would be cruel. Better to stay quiet. Better to remain just a passing figure in her life. But fate did not always respect careful plans. The next morning, a minor accident left her struggling with an injured hand. It was not serious, but it slowed her work. The cowboy saw her trying to continue despite the pain. Without thinking, he stepped in, taking over some of her tasks.
You don't have to do that, she said softly. I know, he replied.
But I will. She did not argue. Instead, she watched him work with a thoughtful expression. For the first time, she spoke more than a single sentence. Most people don't notice when I'm hurting, she said, but tried to pause, then shrugged. I noticed. Their eyes met briefly, then both looked away. The moment was simple, but it carried weight. He felt something crack inside him, just a little. As the days moved on, he found himself seeking reasons to be nearby. He still spoke little, but his presence said more than words. He told himself it was temporary, just kindness. Yet deep down, he knew something was changing. He did not yet know that she was gathering courage of her own. He did not know that her silence hid a growing storm of fear and hope. All he knew was that the distance he had built so carefully was beginning to close, step by step. And for the first time in a long while, the thought of leaving did not bring relief. The change inside her did not come all at once. It grew slowly, like a quiet ache that refused to leave. Each day she told herself to remain calm, to not imagine things that were not promised. Kindness did not always mean intention. She knew that better than anyone. Still, hope has a way of returning when it is least wanted. Rest. She noticed how the cowboy's steps slowed when he passed near her, how his eyes checked on her hand before looking away. He never asked too many questions, never crossed a line, yet his presence felt steady, not heavy, not demanding, just there. That alone felt new. At night, when she lay awake listening to the wind brush against her shelter, her thoughts returned to the same fear. He would leave. Everyone always did. This place was only a stop for him, and she was only part of the background. She told herself not to forget that truth, but the fear grew stronger, not weaker. She began to understand something painful about herself. She was no longer afraid of being alone the way she once was. She had lived with loneliness for years. What terrified her now was the idea of tasting connection again, only to lose it. One evening, she overheard two men talking near the fire. They spoke casually, not knowing she was close enough to hear.
He won't stay, one said.
Cowboys like him never do.
Yeah, the other replied.
He'll be gone before the season changes. Their words were not meant to hurt her, but they did.
They confirmed what she already feared. That night, the quiet felt heavier than ever.
She sat outside, staring at the dark land, feeling time press against her chest. She realized then that she had reached a breaking point.
Breaths. Waiting quietly had brought her nothing. Silence had protected her pride, but it had also kept her invisible.
If she stayed quiet now, she would lose him without ever being known. The next day, she tried to act normal.
She worked slowly, carefully, her injured hand still healing. The cowboy noticed her silence was deeper than usual. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but he hesitated. He had learned that questions could open doors he did not know how to close. As the sun began to lower, she saw him preparing to leave for the evening. Panic rose in her chest. If not now, then never. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She stepped forward. "Can I speak with you?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but only because she forced it to be.
He turned, surprised.
He nodded.
Of course. They walked a short distance away from the others, stopping near a quiet stretch of land where the noise of the camp faded.
For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt different now. Heavy, expectant. She struggled to find the right words. Her mind raced, then went empty. Finally, she spoke from the place that hurt the most.
I don't know how to say this properly, she began.
"I'm not good with speeches." He waited, patient, his expression serious but not unkind. "I have lived a long time being unseen," she continued. "I told myself it didn't matter, but it does." Her hands trembled. "Brash." She clasped them together. "People look past me," she said. "They always have. I am not young anymore. I don't have much to offer except honesty and effort. But I am tired of being alone." The words were out now, unstoppable. "I know you don't plan to stay," she said softly. "I know I am asking for something difficult, but I need to say this before you go." She looked up at him, her eyes full but not pleading in the way he expected. They were tired eyes. Brave eyes. "No one wants me," she said simply. "And I don't want to disappear without trying one last time. I need a husband. Not to save me, just to walk beside me." The air felt still. Even the wind seemed to pause. The cowboy felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. He had expected many things, but not this. Not such honesty, not such quiet courage. Her words hit him harder than anger or blame ever could. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Break. His thoughts tangled together. He felt sympathy, fear, respect, and something deeper that scared him most of all. He had avoided responsibility his entire adult life, not because he was careless, but because he was afraid of failing again. Breath. Afraid of being needed and not being enough. "I don't know what to say," he admitted finally. She nodded. "I understand. I didn't say this expecting an answer right now." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I just needed you to know," she said. "I needed to stop hiding." For a moment he thought she might cry. She didn't. Instead, she stood straighter, as if speaking the truth had lifted something heavy from her shoulders. "Psst. I won't trouble you again," she added. "I respect your path." She turned to leave. "Wait," he said before he could stop himself. She paused but did not turn around.
You were wrong about one thing, he said. You said no one wants you, he continued. That's not true. The words surprised him as much as they surprised her.
"I noticed you," he said, "before you ever spoke to me. Your strength, your patience, the way you keep going when no one is watching.
His voice was quiet but firm.
That doesn't mean I have an easy answer," he added, "but it means your life is not invisible." Her eyes filled, but this time she smiled, small and unsure. "That's more than I've heard in a long time," she said. They stood there, neither moving closer nor farther apart. The moment was fragile, like glass. He knew that whatever he chose next would change everything. Narration. He also knew that walking away without thought would haunt him longer than staying ever could. "I need time," he said honestly. She nodded again. "Time is fair."
As she walked back toward the camp, her steps felt lighter, even though the outcome was uncertain.
She had spoken her truth. That alone felt like victory. The cowboy remained where he was, staring out at the land. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of another person's hope resting near his own guarded heart. He did not yet know what choice he would make, but he knew one thing for certain. But he would never forget the courage it took for her to speak. Breaths. The days after her words felt longer than all the years before them. Nothing on the surface had changed, yet everything felt different. She went about her work as she always had, careful, steady, quiet. But inside her, a storm moved slowly. She had spoken. She had been seen. No matter what happened next, that truth could not be taken away. The cowboy, on the other hand, felt unsettled in a way he had not felt for a long time. Her voice echoed in his thoughts during the day and followed him into the night. He replayed her words again and again, not because they pressured him, but because they were honest. She had not asked for rescue. She had asked for companionship. That made it harder to dismiss. He tried to focus on his work, riding longer hours than usual, pushing himself until his body ached. He told himself that exhaustion would quiet his thoughts. It didn't. The harder he worked, the clearer her face became in his mind. Calm, brave, tired of waiting. He remembered the past he had worked so hard to bury, a time when he had promised to stay. A time when he had believed that effort alone could protect two people from loss. When that chapter of his life ended, he had sworn never to let himself be that vulnerable again. Walking away had seemed easier than risking another deep wound. But now, walking away did not feel easy at all. Others in the settlement began to notice the quiet tension between them. They did not speak of it directly, but glances lingered longer than before. A few people offered advice to him that he did not ask for. Some warned him that responsibility would tie him down. Others spoke of expectations and judgment. He listened, but did not respond. But he had learned that most people spoke from their own fears, not from truth.
One afternoon, he found her repairing a torn piece of fabric outside her shelter.
Desk. Her injured hand was better now, but she still worked slowly. Breaths. He stood nearby, unsure whether to speak. She looked up first.
"You don't have to avoid me," she said gently. "I'm not," he replied, though he knew it was only partly true.
She set the fabric aside. "I meant what I said before," she continued. "I don't expect anything. I won't chase you for an answer." He nodded. "I know." They sat in silence for a while. It was not uncomfortable, but it was full. Finally, he spoke. "I'm afraid of doing this wrong," he admitted.
"Of offering something I can't keep." She listened without interrupting. "I've seen what broken promises do," he said.
Narration. To people who trust them. She nodded slowly.
So have I. That shared understanding settled between them like solid ground.
"I don't need perfect," she said. "I need honest. Even if the path is hard." They invited. That night, he did not sleep at all. He watched the stars fade and return, thinking about what kind of man he wanted to be. He realized that his distance had protected him, but it had also kept him from living fully. Safety, he now understood, was not the same as peace. The next day, he made a decision. He did not announce it to anyone. He did not make promises yet. Instead, he chose action. He began including her in small parts of his day, asking her opinion, sharing simple meals, sitting beside her without rushing away. These were quiet choices, but they mattered. Bet. She noticed, of course. She noticed everything. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future without immediately pushing the thought away. She did not dream wildly. She imagined simple things. Shared work, desk, shared silence. Someone to speak her name with care. There were difficult moments, too. Doubts crept in. Old habits pulled at him. He sometimes withdrew without explanation, lost in his thoughts. When that happened, she did not confront him with anger. She gave him space, but not distance. She stayed present. One evening, as the wind carried the smell of rain, he finally spoke the words that had been building inside him. I don't want to leave, he said quietly. She did not speak right away, afraid that reacting too quickly might break the moment.
I don't know what this will look like, he continued.
And I won't pretend it will be easy, but I don't want to walk away from you. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. That's enough to start, she said. They did not rush into declarations or plans. They moved slowly, with care, learning each other's rhythms. Trust did not arrive suddenly. It grew, step by step, built on shared effort rather than words. Some people disapproved. Bah. Others whispered. A few surprised them with quiet support. Neither of them let outside voices guide their choices anymore. They had both lived too long under the weight of other people's opinions. As time passed, the cowboy realized something unexpected. Responsibility did not feel like a chain. It felt like purpose. Waking each day knowing someone counted on him did not weaken him. Breaths. It steadied him. The Apache woman, too, felt a shift inside herself.
She no longer carried her dignity alone. It was reflected back to her in the way he listened, the way he stood beside her, the way he did not rush her story.
They were still cautious, still learning. But the loneliness that once defined them had begun to loosen its grip. Neither of them called it love yet, but they both felt it growing. The change did not arrive with celebration or loud promises. It came quietly, like the first light of morning that slowly pushes away the dark. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew stronger, not because of grand words, but because of steady presence. The cowboy stopped thinking of the settlement as a temporary stop. Without realizing it at first, he began to plan his days around her desk. He repaired things that had long been ignored. He stayed instead of riding out at dawn. The land no longer felt like a place to pass through. It felt like somewhere he belonged. The Apache woman noticed the difference in herself, too. She no longer woke with the same heavy feeling in her chest. The quiet no longer scared her. Even when they were not speaking, she felt less alone. For the first time in many years, she felt chosen. Not out of pity, but out of respect. They spoke more openly now. About small things at first. Daily work, breath, memories of the land. Then, slowly, about deeper things. Loss, fear, regret. They did not try to fix each other's past or buy and travel. They listened. That was enough. One evening, as they shared a simple meal under the open sky, she spoke carefully.
I never imagined life would turn this way, she said.
I thought my chance had passed. He looked at her and shook his head. Maybe chances don't disappear, he said. Maybe they wait. She smiled at that. There were still challenges. Not everyone accepted their bond. Some believed it would not last. Others questioned his decision to stay. A few looked at her with doubt, as if expecting her happiness to fade. She had lived with judgment her entire life. This time, it did not break her. She had learned that peace does not come from being approved by everyone. It comes from being honest with yourself. The cowboy struggled too, in quiet ways. There were days when old habits returned, when he felt the urge to pull away. When that happened, he reminded himself why he stayed. He reminded himself that running had never truly saved him. One afternoon while repairing a fence together, he stopped and looked at her. I want to do this right, he said, breath of a shower. She met his gaze. So do I. That was when they spoke clearly, without fear. Not with dramatic promises, but with understanding. They agreed to walk forward together.
To share responsibility.
To build a life based on effort, not fantasy. Marriage, to them, was not about ceremony or approval. It was about commitment. When the day came, it was simple. No large crowd, no grand display. Just a quiet agreement between two people who had found each other at the edge of hope. The land watched. The wind moved softly. That was enough.
Life did not suddenly become easy. There were hard seasons.
Desperation. Long days. Moments of doubt. But there was also laughter, comfort, the warmth of shared silence at the end of tiring days. The simple joy of knowing someone would be there when the sun rose. The Apache woman no longer felt invisible. Her voice mattered. Her presence mattered. She was no longer someone waiting at the edge of life. She was living it. The cowboy changed too. He became steadier, less restless. He learned that strength did not come from standing alone, but from standing with someone. He learned that choosing to stay was not a weakness, it was courage. Years later, people spoke of them with quiet respect. Not because their life was perfect, but because it was real. They had built something strong from honesty and patience. Sometimes, she thought back to the night she almost stayed silent. The night she nearly let fear win. She knew then how close she had come to losing everything she now had. She never regretted speaking, and the cowboy never regretted listening. Their story did not end with the dramatic moment. It continued, day after day, shaped by shared effort and quiet trust. It stood as a simple truth. Even when the world makes you feel unwanted, courage can still open a door. And sometimes one honest moment is enough to change an entire life.